Sup guys, this is VinylicPuma, back with the Borderlands 3 video, and rather than do a countdown video, I figured I could talk about which character I think is the best as a starter for new players and beginners. Now this video will be comparing each of the 4 different characters across 3 of my own personal metrics, which are simply who is the easiest to play, who has the best growth potential, or who is best at endgame, and finally I'll be discussing who is the most interesting character and offers the best variety for new players that really want to change up their builds every 10 levels or so. And then at the very end of this video, I'll give you guys my final verdict on who I think is the best beginner class. And of course, it would be immoral of me to not demand that you guys smash that like button to help will new Borderlands 3 Vault Hunters into existence, and failing that, just let me know what kind of Vault Hunter you would want to see in Borderlands 3. Otherwise, and with our introduction, exposition, opening act, or whatever we want to call this out of the way, let's talk about each of the classes and then go our way from there. In Borderlands 3, you have 4 and unfortunately only 4 characters/classes to choose from. You have MOZE the Gunner, who specializes with grenades, shields, and ammo consumption abilities that just so happens to pilot a mech for her action skill. You have AMARA, who is Borderlands 3's Siren that specializes in elemental damage and melee combat. You have ZANE, who specializes with cryo weapons, kill skills, and can activate 2 out of any of his 3 action skills at the same time. And finally, you have Flak, where his signature feature is his pet, and he functions more like a hunter class from the previous Borderlands titles, meaning he's more like Mordecai or Zero. Now, on the one hand, a good argument could be made that it doesn't necessarily matter who you start with, as each Vault Hunter is pretty powerful by the time you reach maximum level. However, I do think some characters are easier to play due to how they are designed. After all, and for example, MOZE has the advantage of being able to enter Iron Bear as a part of her action skill, and it just so happens that Iron Bear has its own health bar separate from MOZE's. Thus, you can use it as kind of a meat shield should you ever get into a really tough situation. But for now, let's talk a little bit more about what character is easiest to play, and then we'll move on to our other categories. If you're looking for an easier time in the initial areas, I think I can definitely recommend against picking ZANE. While this isn't to say that the character is bad or anything, the issue with ZANE is that it takes quite a while to really take advantage of the best he has to offer. Even in the case of the barrier, which I would argue is the best of his action skills, you really need to be around level 15 or 20 or so you can get the dome augment for it, which ends up extending the entire barrier in basically 360 degrees. Similar things can be said of the other action skills as well, as the Digiclone becomes more ideal once you get the double barrel capstone, and the Sentinel drone becomes more ideal once you get Seeing Red, which allows you to activate all of the kill skills that you just spec'd for within ZANE's blue subtree. So again, ZANE isn't necessarily bad, he's just probably not the best choice super early on. As for who is easy to play or start with, I'd recommend MOZE for some of the reasons I mentioned earlier. Not only does Iron Bear have its own health bar and provide you with a layer of defense, but MOZE has a good selection of skills that can be picked up by level 15 or so. Case in point, the combination of Cloud of Lead, Stoke the Embers, and Redistribution is a powerful combination, since the former 2 skills boost your incendiary damage, while Cloud of Lead in particular allows your shots to not consume ammo, and Redistribution allows you to regenerate ammo when you score a critical hit. You also have the option of going into the other subtrees on MOZE, where Demolition Woman, for example, provides great growth once you get some really good grenades. But we'll go over that a little bit later. As for our other 2 Vault Hunters, AMARA and Flak have some good skills early on. AMARA's Illuminated Fist is surprisingly powerful if you like melee, while Flak's 2 Fang works great on most single projectile weapons. Of these 2, I'd say AMARA has a slight edge earlier on, since it's a lot easier to snipe a phase-grasped enemy, but overall, I would say both characters are great. If I were only picking one, I would recommend MOZE, simply for the fact that Iron Bear is so good, and because MOZE has a great collection of high-quality skills. Something else we should talk about revolves around the idea of growth potential, or who is best at endgame. To be honest with you guys, this one is harder to pick since it depends on what kind of gear you ultimately end up using and also depends on how you've maxed out your Guardian ranks. but if I had to pick a character for this, it would probably be Flak. Maybe it's just me, but I don't think I've really seen the damage numbers get quite as high as they do on Flak, and I think this is largely thanks to some of Flak's better skills like Two Fang, Megavore, the Power Inside, and Unblinking Eye, where the damage potential you can achieve as a result of these can be massive. It's very possible to deal in the neighborhood of 80 to 100,000 damage sometimes once you've maxed out your Guardian ranks, and thus he may actually be the strongest character, or at the very least, he seems to be able to benefit from the Overkill perk the most. After Flak, I would say it's MOZE. While Iron Bear is actually kind of weak in Mayhem 3, grenade-style setups for MOZE can be quite powerful, especially if you combine the right weapons and grenades with skills like Means of Destruction, Pull the Holy Pin, and Vampire. With the right gear, your gun's splash damage can regenerate your grenade count, while Pull the Holy Pin and Vampire will boost the power of your grenade by increasing their damage potential and healing potential. Add on the fact that you can often fire your gun and throw grenades at the same time, and you've got yourself a pretty powerful setup, especially if you're using the Hex, which will allow you to Raffle Stomp most enemies. As for AMARA and ZANE, both have great growth potential, with ZANE in particular being far stronger at maximum level than he is at lower levels, but I think I just prefer AMARA more. Cryo Element can often be resisted by anointed enemies, and thus you may find the ability to transition between corrosive, shock, and fire to be more useful. But then again, that is just my opinion, and maybe ZANE's got something really awesome that I'm overlooking. Overall, I'd say Flak is probably the strongest, especially once he's got some momentum with his Overkill perk, but the other three Vault Hunters, whether it be MOZE, ZANE, or AMARA, all have great growth potential and are pretty powerful in their own right. Now, this next category is fairly subjective, but I will talk about who I think is the most versatile and interesting character to play. The reason I felt it was important to talk about this is because certain characters don't have quite as much variety in playstyles as others. Borderlands 3 is better than previous games in this regard, since you can have 3 or more action skills on a character, but some characters like MOZE and ZANE have more of a sameness to how they play when compared to Flak, who can get different pets that provide different attributes in addition to noticeably different action skills, which do very different things. After all, Flak with the Spider Ant and Rack Attack action skill plays a lot different than when you play Flak with the Skag and the Gamma Burst action skill. However, and while I like Flak quite a lot, I think I may have to give the edge to AMARA for this category, as I like her action skills and corresponding loadouts work. Rather than lock specific augments to specific action skills like you might see on MOZE or ZANE, AMARA's are all interchangeable with one another, and on top of that, AMARA has about 11 action skills in total. Sure, a number of those are Phase Grasp or Phase Cast variants, but there is a surprising amount of variety contained within. Just for Phase Grasp alone, you have the Eternal Fist, which will allow you to chain Phase Grasps across multiple enemies, and Fist over Matter, which works well against bosses or enemies that can't normally be Phase Grasped. Getting away from Phase Grasp for a moment, Phase Slam, Phase Cast, and Fracture all function differently from one another as well, giving the player more variety for their action skill. So I would say that's another boon for AMARA and makes her more interesting and varied than many of the other Vault Hunters. But this brings us to my final verdict. To review, I felt that MOZE was the easiest to play, Flak was probably the strongest with the most growth potential, and AMARA was the most interesting and fun character to play. ZANE didn't really win anything, but all things considered, I think he's a fine character, though I think the other 3 Vault Hunters are simply better. However, if I had to narrow it down to just one character of the rest, I think I would have to go with MOZE. Perhaps this is bias on my part since MOZE was my starter/beginner character, but all things considered, she has a great action skill that should serve you well in the early parts of the game, and by the time you reach Mayhem 3 or 4, you have plenty of great skills to choose from. After all, skills like Means of Destruction, Pull the Holy Pin, Vampire, Thin Red Line, Phalanx Doctrine, Force Feedback, Cloud of Lead, Stoke the Embers, Redistribution, Rushing Offensive, and also Forge are fantastic. There really are a lot of really great skills here, and I think you'll agree that MOZE is a pretty fantastic character to start with. After that, and if you find MOZE isn't really to your liking, I would recommend AMARA. She has a few different playstyles you can mess around with, whether it be melee, phase grasp, or phase cast/rush, and I think you'll agree that each of these are different enough that you'll want to respec just to try out each one to see how they work. AMARA is also great with elemental weapons, which usually get boosted in Mayhem mode, so I would say that's yet another reason why I would recommend her. At the end of the day, guys, I think you'll find that these two will probably make the most sense for most players. This isn't to say you shouldn't try out the other two, as Flak in particular can be really powerful, but I think you'll ultimately end up agreeing with me that MOZE and AMARA are really the best. Not only do both have decent skills that the player can take advantage of early on, but they also have great growth potential as well. So in summary, if you're looking for a great beginner class, I would either pick MOZE or AMARA. But until next time, guys, I think that's going to wrap up this particular video. If you enjoyed this video, definitely be sure to smash like, click the bell so you can be notified when I upload more Borderlands videos, and as always, and again, thank you all so much for supporting this channel. Take care, and I'll see you all in the next one.